They threw me out of my own house the night we buried my husband. My daughter-in-law looked me in the eye and told me to pack my bags, called me a leech, said I was just there. But here's what she didn't know. I owned the house. I owned the skyscraper in New York City. I owned almost everything. And I let her throw me out. Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching, whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in Australia, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France. I want to know. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't just sit back. Tell me where in the world you are. Now, let's dive into the story. My name is Alberta. I'm 64 years old, and my life ended and began on a Tuesday in October. The worst pain wasn't losing Richard. We were married 38 years. I held his hand as he took his last breath after cancer. That pain was deep and hollow. I was ready for that grief. The sharper pain came 12 hours later. That was the betrayal. The funeral was at St. Michael's in our town of Briarwood, Connecticut. I wore a navy dress. He always said it brought out my eyes. People patted my hand. They whispered, "What a devoted wife." If only they knew. Afterward, everyone came back to the house, the big colonial on Willow Lane, my house, but they didn't know that. I watched them swarm through it. My stepson Marcus and his wife eyed the furniture. My stepdaughter Sarah asked sharp questions about Richard's business. But Cynthia was the worst. She'd only been family for 3 years, David's wife. She looked at me like I was something she scraped off her shoe, a gold digger, a placeholder. All day I felt her cold little glances, her whispers that stopped when I walked by. I was exhausted. My heart was broken, but I kept serving food. I kept being the gracious widow. The last guests left at 8:30. I was in the kitchen. My hands shook as I loaded the dishwasher. That's when I heard the footsteps. Heavy, deliberate. They stopped in the doorway. I didn't turn around. "Well, that's over with," Cynthia said. I kept loading plates. "Thank you for helping," I said quietly. "Richard would have appreciated it." "Cut the act, Alberta." I turned. Cynthia stood there, arms crossed. Behind her was David, looking at his shoes. Flanking them were Marcus and Sarah, a firing squad. Cynthia stepped closer. "The grieving widow routine. You can drop it now. We need to talk about practical matters." "What practical matters?" I asked. "This house, Richard's assets, the family business." She said it slow, like I was a child. "We think it's best if you start looking for your own place." "My own place?" Sarah cleared her throat. "It's quite large for one person. The upkeep costs." "Are you telling me to leave?" My voice was a whisper. Cynthia smiled. It wasn't kind. "I'm telling you to be realistic, Alberta. You're 64. Richard took care of you, but that's over. You need to downsize. Find something appropriate for your situation." "My situation?" "You never worked, did you?" Fake sympathy dripped from her voice. "Richard provided everything. This house, your lifestyle, but that was Richard's money, Richard's success." She waved her hand around my kitchen like she was picking new curtains. Something cold settled in my chest. "This is my home." Marcus spoke up. "Dad would want us to be practical. There are 4 of us kids, grandchildren, college funds." "Richard left a will," I said. "We'll honor whatever small provision he made for you," Cynthia dismissed me. "But let's be honest, you were his second wife. You didn't build anything with him. You were just there." The words were physical blows. Just there. After 38 years. After the sickness. After the love. Just there? "I think you should pack your things tonight," Cynthia said. "David and I will stay to manage things. It'll be easier if we handle Richard's affairs." I looked at David, the boy I raised since he was 12. I pleaded with my eyes for him to stop this. He wouldn't look at me. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked. Cynthia shrugged. "There are lovely senior communities, assisted living. I'm sure you'll find something suitable." Assisted living, like I was a helpless old woman. I stood in my kitchen, surrounded by people I called family, and felt the last piece of my heart break. The grief for Richard was quiet sorrow. This was a roaring betrayal. They were erasing me. But as I looked at their faces, Cynthia's cruel smile, the others' uncomfortable stares, a new feeling grew. Cold, quiet, patient. "Okay," I said simply. Cynthia blinked. "What?" "Okay, I'll pack tonight. I'll be gone in the morning." The silence was deafening. They wanted a fight. They wanted tears. They wanted a scene to justify their cruelty. I gave them nothing. I turned back to the dishwasher. "Well, good," Cynthia stammered. "That's mature of you." I didn't answer. I listened to their footsteps leave. I listened to their hushed, excited whispers start in the living room. They were already dividing up my life. They had no idea. They thought they were getting rid of a burden. They thought they were claiming what was theirs. They thought the widow was a sad old lady with nowhere to go. They were so wrong. As the dishwasher hummed, I allowed myself a small, cold smile. Tomorrow, my real life would begin, and theirs was about to get very, very complicated. I packed 2 suitcases that night, just 2. One small roller bag, one leather weekender from a trip to Charleston with Richard. I filled them with simple things: comfortable clothes, my good wool coat, a photo of my parents, my grandmother's recipe box, the cards stained with love. Everything else, I left. The jewelry box on my dresser, the artwork, the designer dresses. I could picture Cynthia in my bedroom right then, running her fingers over the silk, mentally taking inventory. Let her, I thought. Let them believe the grieving widow left with nothing but old clothes and memories. It made me invisible, and invisible was my best weapon. Before sunrise, I wheeled my suitcases down the hall. David snored from the guest room. They hadn't even waited for me to leave. I didn't look back. I closed the front door and got into my car, a 5-year-old Toyota Camry nobody looked at twice. I drove 20 minutes to the Hampton Inn on Silas Deane Highway. Not fancy, free breakfast, reliable Wi-Fi, anonymous. I checked in under my maiden name, Alberta Morrison, paid cash for a week. The kid at the desk barely glanced at me. Just another older woman alone, probably visiting grandkids. Perfect. I was a ghost. Room 237 smelled like cleaning products. I sat on the bed. The numbness wore off. The cold feeling from the kitchen came back, spreading like ice water. This wasn't grief. This was fury, a deep, simmering fury. But fury is useless without a plan, and I had a plan Richard and I made years ago. I picked up the phone. The first call was to Harold Steinberg. Harold was Richard's lawyer for 25 years, but for the last 15, he was my lawyer. The family didn't know that. They thought I just poured tea when he visited. "Alberta," he answered, voice warm with sorrow. "I'm so sorry. Richard was a good man." "Thank you, Harold," I said, steady. "I need to see you tomorrow, somewhere private." A pause. Harold was sharp. "The family's giving you trouble?" "Something like that." "I'll come to you," he said immediately. "Text me the address." The next morning, Harold arrived at the Hampton Inn. He carried a worn leather briefcase. He looked like he'd fought this battle for 50 years. I ordered coffee and pastries, a strange luxury in the drab room. "How bad?" he asked, sitting in the armchair. I told him everything: Cynthia's demands, the tribunal, assisted living, The words "just there." Harold's kind face hardened, his jaw tightened. "Do they have any idea," he asked finally, "about your real situation?" "None," I said. "Richard and I decided long ago, let the world think he was the provider, let the kids think I was just the wife who liked to garden." I looked out at the parking lot. "Do they have any legal right?" Harold almost laughed. "Alberta, they have less than nothing. They're building castles in the air." He opened his briefcase, thick folder. "Everything has been legally yours for over a decade. Richard transferred assets years before he got sick to avoid this." He gestured at the hotel room. "Why?" I whispered. "Why let them think—" "Richard was proud," said Harold gently. "A little old-fashioned. He loved you, but he liked being seen as the man who took care of you. It was his vanity. And you," he smiled, "you were always the strongest in the room, even sitting quietly." I thought of all the business advice I'd given Richard that he'd presented as his own. I didn't mind. I loved him. But now he was gone, and the people in the corner were throwing the secret out with the trash. "What about the house?" I asked. "Technically, you could have the sheriff evict him today, but I'm guessing you don't want to." "No," I said. The cold feeling became a clear, sharp plan. And then I reminded them that the quietest woman in the room often owns it. After Harold left, I got in my Camry. I drove back to Willow Lane. I parked 3 houses down behind a delivery van. I sat and watched. Within an hour, a big moving truck arrived. Cynthia stood on the driveway in designer jeans, pointing like a general. Men carried in a modern desk, not Richard's oak one, a floral chair, boxes and boxes. She wasn't just staying, she was moving in, claiming the kingdom. My phone buzzed, a text from David. "Hope you found a nice place. Cynthia's organizing Dad's office, found some business files." I stared at the message. I almost felt sorry for him. So weak, so clueless. Then the clean, hot anger came back. Business files. If they only knew. Richard's real files weren't in that house. They were in a safety deposit box downtown with property deeds, stock certificates, the truth. But let them look. Let them find his old client lists from Holloway Consulting, the small firm everyone thought was our only income. Let them add up modest numbers and plan modest inheritances. The truth would be sweeter when it hit them. I started the car and drove downtown to the glass tower of First National Bank. I took the private elevator to the wealth management floor. My banker, Margaret Chin, was waiting. "Mrs. Morrison," she said, clasping my hands, "I'm so sorry. How are you holding up?" "As well as can be," I said, "but circumstances changed. I need to make adjustments." "Of course," she said, leading me to a quiet room. She probably thought I needed to update beneficiary forms, the poor, helpless widow. Instead, I handed her Harold's documents. Margaret scanned the first page. She blinked, looked at me, back at the paper. Her professional calm flickered. "Mrs. Morrison, these amounts, I had no idea." "Privacy was important," I said gently, "but the situation is different now." "When would you like this done?" she asked, composing herself. "Immediately." As she left, I sat in the plush quiet. I thought of Cynthia hanging clothes in my closet, Marcus and Sarah meeting with a strip mall financial advisor, David following orders. They thought the game was over. They thought they'd won. They had no idea the real game hadn't started. They'd picked a fight with a woman who spent 38 years learning patience, strategy, the long game. My phone rang. Cynthia. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice was tight, nervous. "Alberta, we found confusing paperwork, legal stuff that doesn't make sense. Call me back. You need to explain." I deleted the message. "No, Cynthia, there's nothing I need to explain to you. Not yet. Let them wonder. Let them sit in my house and feel the first cold trickle of doubt." I signed Margaret's papers with a steady hand. With every signature, I felt lighter, stronger. The invisible widow was fading. Someone else was taking her place. Someone they should have been nicer to. The next few days, I built my new life from the hotel business center. 2 computers, a printer, burnt coffee smell. Perfect. Tuesday, I called the company that managed my 3 apartment buildings in Manhattan. Mine, not Richard's. I bought the first one with money from my first husband's life insurance when I was 38, and everyone thought I was just a sad young widow. Wednesday, video call with my investment advisor in Boston. Big, boring words representing more money than my stepchildren ever dreamed of. But Thursday was my favorite. I talked about the building. Not just any building, my building. A cast-iron beauty in Soho, New York City. I bought it 15 years ago, a rundown warehouse in a rough neighborhood. Richard thought it was a money pit, but I saw the light through the huge windows. I saw the history in the brick. I used my secret money. I spent years restoring it, turning it into high-end lofts. Now appraised at $28 million. The rent every month was more than Richard's business made in a year. That Thursday, I spent 2 hours on the phone with architects finalizing plans for a new rooftop penthouse. For me. I hung up and smiled. A real smile, not the cold one. A smile of pure satisfaction. They were over there counting pennies from a can. I was over here, building a palace in the sky. The next morning, Harold called. They hired a lawyer, Jackson Finley, middling, does wills for middle-class families. "What does he want?" I asked. "He's asking formal questions, and," Harold said, a smile in his voice, "he's requesting a formal reading of the will, all beneficiaries, including you." "When?" "Monday, 2 p.m., his office in Hartford." "Perfect," I said. "I'll be there." "Alberta," Harold said, serious. "Once we walk in, the curtain comes down. They'll see everything." I looked out at the ordinary world. "Harold, I've been ready since the day I married Richard. The curtain should have come down long ago." That weekend, I went shopping. Not for grief, for war. I went to the elegant boutique in West Hartford where I had an account. I bought a navy suit, simple, elegant, powerful. I dug out my grandmother's pearls and the Cartier watch Richard gave me. I wanted to look like what I was, a woman of substance who allowed herself to be underestimated. Sunday night, I checked out of the Hampton Inn. I didn't need to be a ghost anymore. I checked in to the penthouse suite at the Goodwin Hotel, just for one night, just to remember who I was. I ordered lobster and champagne. I reviewed Harold's documents by the window. Hartford sparkled below. Everything was in order. Everything legal. Everything was about to change. Monday was gray and drizzly, a good day for endings and beginnings. I dressed carefully, the suit, the pearls, makeup like armor. I drove to the ugly brick office building. I was 15 minutes early. The receptionist chewed gum, looked me up and down. "You here for the Holloway estate thing?" "I am. Alberta Morrison, the widow." Something in my voice made her look up. Loud voices echoed from down the hall. "This is ridiculous. Why does she need to be here?" Cynthia's sharp voice. "The law requires all parties," a strained man's voice answered. "But she didn't contribute anything." Marcus. I sat in the lobby, listening to them argue about me. The receptionist stared, waiting for me to crumble. I folded my hands, became the little old lady they expected. At 2 o'clock, Harold arrived, a brief, professional nod. Behind him, a woman I'd never seen. Tall, silver hair and a severe cut. She looked like she could argue with a thunderstorm. "Mrs. Morrison," Harold said formally, "Catherine Walsh, representing your interests." Catherine shook my hand, firm grip. "Let's get this done." Jackson Finley appeared, soft man, sweating. "Everyone's here, shall we?" The conference room was too big. The family sat on one side like a hostile jury, Cynthia center, David and Sarah flanking, Marcus behind. They wore their best clothes. They looked like people expecting a big check. I sat directly across, Harold and Catherine on either side, our wall of quiet power. Jackson Finley started reading, legal jargon, then the part that mattered. "To my children, Marcus, Sarah, and David Holloway, I leave $50,000 each." You could hear a pin drop. Cynthia's face froze. Sarah's mouth fell open. Marcus turned red. 50,000, a nice gift, a tip. "And to my beloved wife, Alberta Morrison Holloway," Finley read, speeding up, "I leave the remainder of my estate, all property, all assets, hers absolutely." Deafening silence. "Excuse me," Cynthia's voice cut glass. "Repeat that?" "The bulk goes to the spouse," Finley stammered. "What does that include?" Sarah shrieked. Catherine Walsh answered, cool and clear. "All real property, the house, all financial accounts, all business assets, all personal property." "Impossible," Marcus slammed the table. "Dad would never do that." "Legal and valid," Harold said calmly. "But she didn't earn it," Cynthia exploded, composure gone. "She never worked. She was just there, living off him." Just there. The words hung between us. I looked at her, at all of them. I slowly stood up. "You're right, Cynthia," I said, quiet but filling the room. "I never contributed to Richard's success, his business, his reputation, all him." They stared, confused. "But," I continued, "Richard's estate isn't what you think, and I'm not who you think I am." Catherine Walsh opened her briefcase. The sound was loud. "What do you mean?" David whispered, pale. I looked at each of them, the dismissers, the cruel, the greedy. "I mean," I said, a small, cold smile touching my lips, "you've made very expensive assumptions." Catherine slid documents across the table, soft, final thumps. The game was over. The real story began. The first document landed in front of Cynthia. She stared like it was a snake. "This," Catherine said, "is the deed for 174 Willow Lane, the house you're occupying." Cynthia didn't want to touch it. She did. Her face went white, then gray. "The name on the title is Alberta Morrison, sole owner. Transfer recorded in 2008. "That's a mistake," Sarah snatched the paper. "Dad bought it before her." "He did," Harold agreed mildly. "In 2007, he refinanced. The capital came from Mrs. Morrison. The new title is in her name." "What capital?" Marcus barked. "She didn't have any." Catherine allowed a thin smile. "Mrs. Morrison has had substantial assets since before her marriage. She kept it private." My turn. "The money came from my first husband," I said calmly. "When he died, I was left well off. I was 38. I had investments, property. When I married your father, I didn't need his money. We used mine." Dead silence. "But you never worked," David repeated weakly. "I managed a portfolio. I bought real estate. I just didn't talk about it at dinner." Catherine slid more papers. "Records for Morrison Holdings, LLC, Mrs. Morrison's company. It owns 17 properties across 3 states. Cynthia made a choked sound. "Including," Catherine said, picking up a sheet, "a converted warehouse in Soho, New York City. Appraised value, $28 million. The number exploded. $28 million. Sarah gasped. Marcus looked punched. David stared, eyes huge. "That's one property," Harold added helpfully. Document after document, bank statements with too many zeros, stock holdings, deeds. The total value of Mrs. Morrison's separate assets is approximately $47 million. The assets from Mr. Holloway's estate, less than $300,000. $47 million. Cynthia shook. She wasn't looking at papers. She looked at me. Her eyes held raw, primal fear. "You're lying," she whispered, no force. "Which part?" I asked softly. "The part where I own the house you threw me out of, or the part where I've paid the taxes on it for a decade with my money?" "Why?" Marcus struggled. "Why didn't Dad tell us?" "Because I asked him not to," I said. I sat back, tired triumph. "You cared about the paper. You only saw the paper." I looked at David. "So when you asked me to leave, you evicted me from my own house. When you called me a leech, you talked about the person who paid for your roof." The truth was a wrecking ball. It swung through their world. Jackson Finley mopped his brow. "Perhaps discuss as a family." "Nothing to discuss," Harold said. "The law is clear. Mrs. Morrison is generous not to charge you with trespassing." Trespassing. A bucket of ice water. "What happens?" Sarah asked, small voice. Catherine answered. "You each get $50,000. As for your residence, you're there at Mrs. Morrison's sufferance. She can have you removed immediately." All eyes on me, the silent, powerless widow, the woman just there. I let them sweat. Then I spoke. "You have 72 hours, I said, flat and final. Get everything out of my house. Take your furniture, leave my home as you found it." Cynthia's voice, high and desperate. "Alberta, please, we're family." I stood, gathered my purse. I walked to the door, paused, hand on the knob. I didn't look back. "You know, Cynthia," I said quietly, "you're right. We are family, and you've just shown me what that word means to you." I opened the door and walked out. Behind me, stunned, shattered silence. The invisible widow was gone. Alberta Morrison, who owned a $28 million skyscraper, walked in the light. The first call came 6 hours later. I was in my penthouse suite, eating steak, watching city lights. "Cynthia." I let it ring. Voicemail. Again. Fourth try, I answered. Silent. "Alberta." Strained sweetness and panic. "We need to talk. This is out of hand." "Has it?" I sipped water. "The house, the money. There has to be a reasonable way." "Reasonable," I repeated, "like you reasonably threw me out the night my husband died." Silence. Then, "We were grieving too. We weren't thinking straight." "You were thinking straight enough to have me pack, to move your furniture in the morning. You were thinking straight when you called me a sanguessuga." Portuguese for bloodsucker. Her sharp intake of breath. She didn't know I understood. "I didn't mean—" "You meant every word," I cut her off. "The only thing you didn't mean was for me to be in a position to do anything about it." I hung up, blocked her number. Next morning, David came to the hotel. The concierge called, unsure. I met him in the lobby. He looked terrible, pale, unshaven, wringing hands, a lost boy, not a 35-year-old man. "Alberta," he blurted, "I'm so sorry. Cynthia gets carried away. I should have stopped her." "Should have, could have, would have," I said, "but you didn't." "I know. I regret it. But we thought Dad provided for us. We thought the house, everything, was ours. We were wrong." "And when you thought it was yours, your first move was to get rid of me, to put me in assisted living?" Air quotes, sour words. "It wasn't like that." "David," I said, firm, the voice I used when he was 15 and lied. "Stop lying, to me and yourself. You saw a chance to have everything, and I was in the way. You let your wife humiliate a grieving woman because you thought it would make you richer." He looked at his hands, no defense. "I'm saying sorry now," he whispered. "I'm saying sorry now that you know I don't need your pity," I said. "Now that you're afraid. That's not an apology, David. That's a surrender." He looked up. His eyes held real fear. "What are you going to do to us?" I studied him, the stepson I taught to ride a bike. I could ruin him. I had the power. But looking at his terrified face, I realized I didn't want to destroy him. I wanted him to learn. "I'll do what I said," I told him. "You have until tomorrow night to get out of my house. Then I change the locks. Then you live your life, make your own money, face your own consequences. No more waiting for an inheritance that was never there." His shoulders slumped. "Cynthia will lose her mind." "Cynthia," I said, "will learn that actions have consequences, just like you are." He left, a broken man. I watched him go. I didn't feel happy or sad. I felt resolved. On the final afternoon, I drove to Willow Lane. Harold came. A locksmith named Tony followed in his van. The driveway was full. David's SUV, Marcus's truck, Sarah's sedan, a sensible Honda I didn't know. "Reinforcements?" Harold murmured. "Let's find out," I said. I didn't wait. I walked to my front door, used my key. They hadn't changed the locks. Why would they? Chatter in the living room died. I walked in. They were all there, plus two strangers, a middle-aged couple on the edge of the sofa. Cynthia's parents, the cavalry. Cynthia stood up, trying for control. "Alberta, we want to discuss a reasonable settlement." "Settlement for what?" I asked. "For the house. We've put time and care into it, made improvements. We deserve compensation if we're kicked out." I almost laughed. "You want me to pay you for living in my house rent-free for a week?" The older woman cleared her throat. "Perhaps we should go, Cynthia. This seems private." "No, please stay," I said, smiling warmly. "I'm Alberta, Richard's widow, and you are?" "Tom and Linda Patterson," the man said reluctantly. "Cynthia's parents." "Nice to meet you. I hope Cynthia explained accurately." Linda looked pained. She said there was a dispute about the will, that things weren't fair. "No dispute," I said calmly. "The will is clear. Richard left his children $50,000 each, the rest to me. The only surprise, most of what people thought was Richard's was mine all along. The house, the investments." Tom frowned. "I don't understand." "I've been financially independent since before Richard," I explained, kind. "The comfortable life they had, funded by my assets, not his. Cynthia thought I was a gold digger, but I was the one holding the gold." I let it sink in. Dawned horror on Linda's face as she looked from me to her daughter. "Cynthia Marie," Linda said, low, terrible voice, "did you throw this woman out of her own house at her husband's funeral?" "Mom, it's complicated." "It's not complicated," I said softly. "She made a cruel assumption. Now she's learning assumptions can be expensive." Tom stood up, face red with shame. "Mrs. Morrison, we apologize profusely. This is not how we raised our daughter." He turned to Cynthia. "We're leaving. We want no part of this." And they walked out. Cynthia's last defense, her own parents ashamed. Dead silence. I looked at my watch. 5:40 p.m. You have 20 minutes until the locksmith starts, whether you're finished or not. Panic. Sarah and Marcus rushed boxes to cars, avoiding my eyes. David moved like a robot. Cynthia stood in the middle of the living room, surrounded by empty space where her fantasy was. She looked at me, all fake sweetness gone, pure, cold hatred. "This isn't over," she hissed. "Yes," I said, meeting her gaze. "It is." She flinched, grabbed a suitcase, walked out without another word, didn't look back. I stood at the window. Watched the cars drive away, one by one. David's taillights glowed red in the dusk. Gone. I nodded to Tony. He got to work. Harold put a hand on my shoulder. "You okay?" I walked through the empty rooms. My house was back, but different, lighter. The heavy feeling of being unwanted, tolerated, was gone. Just a house. My house. I said to Harold, the truth surprising me, free. For the first time in a very long time, it was absolutely true. Tony finished. He handed me 5 shiny new keys. "All set, ma'am." "Thank you, Tony." Cash and a generous tip. He tipped his hat and left. Harold and I alone in the echoing house, just the hum of the refrigerator. "What now?" Harold asked. "Sell? Rent? You could get a fortune." I walked into the living room, sunlight on the spot where Richard's chair was. Christmases, birthdays, good memories tangled with bad. "I'll keep it for now. Maybe rent to a nice family, a young professor." It felt right. New life, not greed. Harold nodded. "Smart. No rush." He gathered his briefcase. "You were magnificent, Alberta. Richard would be proud, not of the money, of you, standing up." Tears pricked my eyes. Release. "Thank you, Harold, for being my secret. The best secrets," he winked, "turn into justice." After he left, I did something silly. I ordered pizza, sat on the bare dining room floor, eating pepperoni from the box. I laughed. I laughed until I cried, the crazy, powerful, invisible widow eating pizza on her $1,000,000 floor. That night, I didn't stay. The house was mine, but not my home, not yet. I locked the new locks, drove back to the hotel. I slept better than I had in years. The next morning, I started my new life for real. I met a realtor, not to sell Willow Lane, to buy. I found a modern condo overlooking the Connecticut River, huge windows, a terrace, no memories. I paid cash. Then I flew to New York. I stood across the street from my building, 8 stories of beautiful old cast iron and new glass. People walked in and out, artists, entrepreneurs, a woman with a fancy dog, living their lives in a place I built. I didn't go in. I didn't need to. Seeing it was enough. Proof. I wasn't just there. I was a creator, a builder, a force. On the flight home, I made a decision. I called my accountant. I won a scholarship fund at the community college for single parents, people starting over, the Morrison Fresh Start Grant. It felt good, better than revenge. Money wasn't for buying happiness, it was for building a life, my life, maybe helping others build theirs. The invisible widow was gone. Alberta Morrison, with new keys and new plans, was just starting. 6 months passed, quiet, peaceful months. I moved into my riverfront condo. I took a painting class. I went to Paris because I felt like it, living my life, my terms. One spring morning, I was on my terrace repotting geraniums, sun warm, river sparkling. My phone rang, local number I didn't know. "Mrs. Morrison? Dr. Evans at Mercy General. A patient listed you as emergency contact, David Holloway." My heart stuttered. "Is he okay?" "Stable. Broken leg, bruised ribs, but he's asking for you specifically." I didn't think. "I'll be right there." I changed. Jeans, sweater. This wasn't about power. This was David. I found him in a semi-private room, leg in a cast, raised, face pale, cheek scraped, young and scared. His eyes opened. "Alberta, you came." "Of course, you're hurt." Weak shrug. "They couldn't reach Cynthia. Phone disconnected." Not surprised. Gossip said their marriage collapsed. No free house, no inheritance. Cynthia left. "I'm sorry, David," I said, meaning it. "Are you?" He looked right at me, eyes clearer than in years. "After everything we did?" I thought. Sorry his cruel wife left? Not really. Sorry he was broken and alone? Yes, deeply. Yes, I said simply. I'm sorry you're in pain. He looked away, tears welling. I need to tell you about that night. I knew it was wrong. Even while it happened, part of me was screaming it was wrong. But I was so angry about the will, so disappointed. I let Cynthia convince me you were the problem. Shaky breath. You raised me. You were more a mother to me than my own mom. And when you needed me, I failed. I've carried that guilt like a stone for 6 months. His words hung in the sterile air. Honest, real. I reached over, took his hand. Cold fingers. Oh, David. I don't expect forgiveness, he whispered. You made a terrible mistake, I said, my eyes filling. Hurtful. But you know what I learned? That night, I thought I was losing my family, but I was losing an idea of a family. You didn't know me. You loved what I did for you, the sweet, quiet stepmom. You never knew the woman with the bank accounts and buildings. He listened, really listened. And now, I said, squeezing his hand, maybe you're starting to see me, the whole person. And I'm starting to see you, not as Richard's weak son, but a man facing his mistakes. Where does that leave us? Small voice. Big question. I had every right to walk away forever. It leaves us here, I said slowly, with a choice. Start over, build something new. But real, David. No secrets, no assumptions. I won't be the invisible fixer. You can't come expecting rescue. He nodded, tear down his cheek. I understand. I want to try. I want to know the real you. Not forgiveness yet. Forgiveness takes time. But a start. Fragile, honest. Then we'll try, I said. I stayed until a nurse shooed me out. Walking to my car, I didn't feel heavy. I felt hopeful. The past was done, the future being written. For the first time, I held the pen. David was discharged a week later. Nowhere to go. His studio apartment was a walk-up, impossible with a cast. You can stay at the condo, I found myself saying, guest room, until you manage stairs. He looked shocked. Sure? No, I said honestly, but I'm willing to try if you are. Awkward at first, polite, injured roommates. But we talked, really talked, not about money or the past, small things. He told me about a book. I told him about painting class, Thai food, old movies. One afternoon, I was on the terrace pruning herbs. David hobbled out on crutches. Can I help? He asked. I showed him how to pinch dead basil leaves. Clumsy, but he tried. You know, he said quietly, focusing on the plant, I drove by the old house, for rent sign. Property manager, I said. Nice young family from the university moves in next month. Good, he said, meaning it. Should have kids. Laughter. Pause. I'm sorry we took that from you, even for a week. You gave it back, I said, and you gave me something else. What? Clarity. I sat back on my heels. You showed me who I wasn't. That forced me to remember who I am. He nodded, understanding dawning. You were never the woman we thought. No, I smiled. I was so much more. We sat in the sun, silence full of peace. Later that week, Marcus and Sarah called, together, video call, nervous. We'd like to take you to lunch, Alberta, Sarah said. If you're willing, no agenda, just lunch. I was wary, but David gave a small nod from across the room. Okay, I said. Lunch. We met at a quiet cafe, stilted at first, staring at menus. Then Marcus said, I got a promotion, project manager. Wonderful, Marcus, I said, genuinely pleased. I used part of the $50,000 for a certification course, Sarah admitted. Helped me get a better job. Glad the money helped, I said. And I was. A start, not a finish. The lunch wasn't a love fest, halting apologies, still shame in their eyes, but new respect. They were seeing me. I saw them, not greedy villains, but flawed people blinded by dollar signs. A start, Just a start. After lunch, I walked by the river. The water kept moving, no matter what. A good lesson. The family I lost was gone, but maybe, just maybe, I was building a new one. Clearer eyes, honest hearts. Worth the try. A month later, a formal letter. Law firm I didn't know. My old fear spiked. Cynthia suing? I opened it. Jackson Finley, their old lawyer. Dear Mrs. Morrison, I withdraw from representing the Holloway family in matters pertaining to Richard Holloway's estate or your assets. Upon review, my client's position was without merit. I have advised them. Apologies for any distress. Sincerely, Jackson Finley. I showed David. He read it, winced. He dropped them. They must be furious. No legal leg to stand on, I said. Any sensible lawyer would see that. Cynthia called me, David said, setting the letter down. Yesterday, living with her parents, not doing well. Angry at me, you, the world. Not surprised, I said. Some people, when wrong, get angrier, can't face the mirror. She wants a divorce, David said, flat. Do you want a divorce? He thought a long time. Yes, the person I married doesn't exist. She was a character in the story I told myself, the rich heir story. When that fell apart, nothing left. A sad truth, but truth. I'm sorry, I said again, my phrase lately. Don't be, he said, sad smile. It's the first real decision I've made in years. Progress doesn't always look happy. Sometimes a sad smile in a quiet room, but still progress. A few days later, another letter, handwritten on floral paper. Alberta. Linda Patterson, Cynthia's mother. Tom and I are ashamed of our daughter's behavior. We raised her to be kind. She was not. We hope you are healing. You handled an impossible situation with grace and strength we admire. Sincerely, Linda and Tom. I held the note. Their kindness touched me. Decency writes a letter. I wrote back. Short, gracious, didn't blame them. We are all responsible for our choices, even our children. I put the letter in my grandmother's recipe box. Not a reminder of hurt, a reminder of apology, of good people still out there. The past was finally, truly becoming the past. So that's my story, the invisible widow who wasn't. A year since Richard died, since that terrible night in the kitchen. I'm on my terrace telling you this. Geraniums bloom. The river is calm. David comes for dinner later. We try a new recipe. Marcus and I text about home repair. Sarah sends puppy pictures. Not a fairy tale. Cynthia is gone. Bridge burned. Some consequences are permanent. My relationship with the kids is different, more distant, careful, but honest. Honesty is more valuable than any inheritance. The house on Willow Lane has a young family with twin girls. I hear their laughter driving by. It makes me smile. My Soho penthouse rents for more than I can spend, so I give it away. The scholarship fund has its first 3 recipients, a single mom becoming a nurse, a man learning to code. That feels better than any skyscraper. And me? I'm 65. I paint terrible pictures. I travel when I want. I read books in the middle of the day. I am visible, to myself most of all. I thought losing Richard was the end. I thought my family's betrayal was the final chapter. But it wasn't. It was the painful, messy beginning of a whole new book, a book where I finally wrote my own name on the cover. So to you watching, if you're feeling invisible, underestimated, just there, remember my story. Your strength might be quiet, your value hidden, but that doesn't mean it's not there. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let people believe the small story they wrote about you while you're quietly living a much bigger, much braver one. Build your own life. Make your own keys. Never let anyone make you feel small in a house you own. Thanks for listening. I've learned a lot in 64 years. Subscribe, and I'll teach you how to spot a liar before they hurt you. Like and comment so you don't miss the next pot of tea. Now, I've got a river to watch and a life to live.